Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Just give it a moment for people to arrive and come through. Nice to see people. Nice to see you. Hope you're having a good start to September and it's not too crazy for you. Thank you all for being here. I will get going in just a second. I'll give people one more moment to come and join us and move my coffee cup out of the way so I don't knock it flying while I'm talking to you. All right then, lovely people, let us get started for this first safeguarding briefing of this academic year. If you have academic years, then I hope it started well. If you don't have academic years, then I hope you've managed to have some sort of summer. I think that goes for everybody, in fairness. Today's briefing will follow the same format as usual. We will have a look at some reports, we'll have a look at some guidance, and then we'll have a conversation and I'll share with you some of the legislation that is en route and some which is awaited. So, firstly, if you've never been to one of these briefings, welcome. I'm Kate Flounders, I run the Safeguarding Association, and the association is specialist in supporting safeguarding professionals who work with 16 to 24-year-olds and older. It's a delightfully grey area and it plays to my legal brain. I've 25 years legal experience. I've been a practising solicitor for almost 20. And I sit as an independent chair. I do trustee work from a safeguarding perspective as well. So my entire life is safeguarding through and through for children and for adults. If you are somewhere noisy, move yourself somewhere quiet or pop some headphones in. If you've got questions as we work our way through today's session, which will be about 20-ish minutes, then feel free to either use the Q&A function or if the chat's working, use the chat function. Unfortunately, for some reason, Zoom just does not like the chat when I do webinars. I'm not entirely sure why, but there we go. Okay, what has been happening? Well, quite a lot, really. There's been a lot going on since our last briefing. We've had a lot of conversations over the summer around the changes to government, what this means from a safeguarding perspective. We've had Keeping Children Safe come in. We've got lots of conversations about where things might be headed, what might be happening. And I know for lots of you, the start of September has been incredibly busy with issues from students and lots of safeguarding concerns, but also from a just managing expectations perspective as well, and some challenging work with former students, staff members, and some other things like that. So there's a lot floating about. There have been a huge number of reports have come through, and I'll share with you one of the major ones. But I wanted to highlight a couple that have come out fairly recently. One is by the charity Kinship, and they've prepared a report into the needs of children in kinship placements. So kinship placements are where a child is placed with a family member, so somebody they are related to, whether that's directly, so a grandparent or an aunt and uncle, or whether it's a wider family member that they may be placed with. And there's a lot of looking at the support needs within there. So if you do work with children who are in kinship placements with family, friends, and have been assessed by the local authority, this might be a report to have a look at. And equally, if you've got staff who are supporting children who are in kinship placements, or maybe have children themselves who've been placed with them from another family member, this could be useful to have a look at. This second report is really troubling given we had ChildQ not that long ago. Lots and lots of problems here. So the Children's Commissioner has prepared a report in relation to stop and search. And lots of children are stopped and searched. The one that worries me is the one I've stated here. So in the period they were looking at, there were 457 strip searches. But in 45% of those searches, so almost half, the Children's Commissioner could not find evidence of an appropriate adult. Now, when we're talking strip searches, we can be talking anybody, usually from about 10 through to being 17. So there's a very broad spectrum, and the police should have appropriate adults called before they start the strip search. And if they can't find somebody as an appropriate adult, it shouldn't really be strip searching. So this is really troubling, that this is, like I say, we're a couple of years on from Child Q, and we've still got such a high proportion of strip searches happening where there isn't an appropriate adult. That's really, really concerning, because that covers the whole kind of spectrum, and is very, very troubling. Every year, we have the Good Childhood Report. This is prepared by the Children's Society. They do it every year and have done for a very, very long time. These are some troubling statistics. There are a wealth of statistics and information within the report. So I would encourage you, if you're working with that older teen age range, so that sort of secondary school age into FE sixth form age range, it's definitely worth a read. What the Children's Society found, that in this year's survey of young people, and there are about 3,000 young people surveyed, that 41% of 10 to 17-year-olds surveyed were very or quite worried about the cost of living. That's enormous. And in terms of cost of living, we're not just talking about being able to buy new clothes. We're talking fundamentally about whether or not they can put food in their bellies, whether or not there's going to be anything to keep them warm, whether they are going to have anything to keep their feet dry in the winter, whether they're going to be able to stay in the property that they are in, whether it's appropriate or not, because of the cost of renting or living in that particular property. When they looked at the latest figures around Europe, and these are slightly different figure set, and related to 2022, so a couple of years ago, we in the UK had the lowest average overall life satisfaction among 15 to 17-year-olds across 27 European countries. We were at the bottom. And that's a significant number of reasons, whether it's relating to home life, whether it's relating to school life, whether it's relating to education, a number of different things. But we were at the bottom for life satisfaction among 15-year-olds, which is just a really, really sad statistic. And some of you may see this playing out within your various settings. And when they looked at school experiences, things like school safety, school belonging, long-term school absences, the UK had the second highest level of bullying in Europe. That's not, none of these stats are anything to be proud of at all. And in terms of the bullying, sadly, that doesn't surprise me. When I think of the work I do as independent chair or where I sit as trustee, there are a significant number of young people who are being bullied either face-to-face, online, via their phones, via text messages, things like that. And I'm seeing a rise in the number of bullying cases with the education providers and charities that I work with. It's been in and around the kind of top 5 issues for a number of years, but it is absolutely creeping its way up quite significantly. Like I said, the Good Childhood Report is available on the Children's Society website. There is a short form summary PDF, which is really useful. And then there's the longer report for those of you who want to dive a bit more into the detail of this. And well worth a read, like I say, if you're working with that secondary school to, well, actually, I think it's secondary school through to undergraduate. If you've got young people coming straight through at 18, 19, then they will be affected by these issues that are being reported. So it's definitely well worth looking at, because those issues don't just stop the moment they turn 18. Just doesn't happen. They will carry on throughout their older teenage life. Bit more in terms of updates. The latest police data that we've got for 2022 shows that 52% of alleged offenders making or sharing sexual images are under 18. And again, we have the issues of bullying that are very prevalent. This has come from the Office for National Statistics. Year ending March 23 is the latest statistics we have. And what they found is that of the children that were surveyed, there's 19% have been victims of bullying online. 19% have messaged someone they don't know online. 92.6% are online daily or almost daily. And 58.1% spent 3 hours or more online daily. The 92% doesn't surprise me that they're online daily or almost daily, because for our young people, being online is life. For lots of young people, like I say, 92.6%. I'm slightly surprised that the 58.1% isn't slightly higher. But the nearly 20% have messaged someone they don't know online. That's a worrying figure. Almost a fifth of young people have messaged someone they don't know. Stranger danger has absolutely changed. But that is a fairly scary statistic in terms of who they're contacting and what they are doing. And again, this might look at 10 to 15-year-olds, but if we think about the young people we work with who are older, this doesn't just stop as they get older. They might become a bit more brash about who they're contacting. They might feel a bit more confident about who they're contacting. That online time may well increase. So there's lots of things there that it's just useful to have this as a baseline and think about how this impacts the students and young people that you are working with and what might be going on for them. Okay, let's have a look at some guidance. And I thought it might be useful to just have a bit of a refresh in terms of some of the guidance we've had over the last 12 months. And then we'll unpick some of the more recent stuff. So Keeping Children Safe in Education is now 2024, in place since the 1st of September. That's the guidance you should be referring to. It is an obligation if you're working with under 18s to make sure that everybody who's working with them has read part 1. I will be providing an audio of part 1 in the next week or two. So, excuse me, if anybody wants a copy of the audio, keep your eyes peeled in terms of emails, and I will let you know when the audio is ready for you to purchase. There will also be an option for whole school, whole organisation as well, if that will make life easier. Working Together to Safeguard Children is updated as of 2023. I don't know if we're going to see any reminders or updates to this as a consequence of the tragedy that happened in Southport. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. Education for children with health needs has been updated, replaces last guidance. Prevent duty guidance was updated in March. Information sharing guidance was updated in May. I really like this updated information sharing guidance because the 7 golden rules are smack centre at the beginning of the document. So no more hunting through to try and find it. If you need somebody to look at those 7 golden rules to check whether or not they can or can't share information or shouldn't be sharing information, then those 7 golden rules are right at the beginning of the document. We've got some updated guidance around children missing education. That was August. Office for Students has introduced guidance around sexual violence and harassment. Importantly, non-disclosure agreements where there's been an allegation of sexual violence or harassment have now been banned by the Office for Students. So you should see those no more. And if you've got universities or those who are registering with the Office for Students who are suggesting that they should be using non-disclosure agreements in those sorts of cases, you may need to be very kindly, firmly reminding them that's not appropriate, because it is a condition of registration. They have gone that far. And anybody who doesn't comply with the guidance as of August of next year may well find that their registration status is revoked. So significant sanctions. There's some updated guidance around children and the court. Now I've looked at, there's one for 5 to 12-year-olds, 5 to 11-year-olds, and one for 12 to 17-year-olds. I've kept the 12 to 17-year-olds here. However, I actually think the guide for the 5 to 11-year-olds is far better. The one for 12 to 17-year-olds is really wordy. It's really, if anybody's used it, do let me know. But I found it really wordy. Wasn't really kind of teen friendly. It just didn't, it felt very heavy and very clunky. Whereas the 5 to 11s actually said exactly the same thing, just did it in a much friendlier way. So I'd be inclined to use the one for the younger children, for the older children, because it isn't baby, it's just slightly more accessible, in my view. And then we've had DFE, Department for Education, advice for education on sharing of nudes and semi-nudes. So there's guidance out there for you to go and have a look at. In terms of the missing education updates, this now replaces the 2016 guidance. So in terms of your policies, make sure that you're referring to this guidance and not the 2016 guidance. It reflects the school attendance regulations that came in earlier this year and reflects the working together guidance around multi-agency working. And if you want specifically what education school responsibility is, that's at page 7 of the missing education updates. So just make sure, for those of you working with under 18s, that your guidance reflects, sorry, your policies and procedures reflect that the guidance is 2024 and not 2016. So you might need to do some updating around that. And then the Office for Students guidance, like I said, non-disclosure agreements are banned. Full requirements come into force in August of next year. Single point of information is what they're looking for, and it will be a requirement of registration. I'm working with members of the Safeguarding Leaders Hub. We individually are looking at what they need to do in terms of compliance for the Office for Students guidance. If you want my help to do that, then the best way to do that is to come into our Safeguarding Leaders Hub, and I can help you deal with that. I can also do it on a consultancy basis, but being a member of the Leaders Hub is probably a better way to do it, because I'm going to be producing guidance for our members to make sure that they know kind of step by step what it is they need to be aware of and how that is going to work, because it's a fairly chunky bit of guidance, and full requirements, like I say, are compliance is a requirement of registration. So the consequences of not complying are really quite enormous for a university or somebody who's a higher education institute who is registered with the Office for Students. So just be aware of that. All right then, let's have a look then at some legal updates. Now, I was expecting, before the general election, there was a whole wealth of stuff we were expecting to come through. There really isn't that much at the moment. We're still waiting for it to plod through. Probably the most important one from an employment perspective is around the updates to the Equality Act, which is around prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace. This comes in force in October. It puts an obligation on employers to prevent sexual harassment to their employees. Particularly important for those, well, for all employees, for all employers, but for those of you from a safeguarding perspective, this is particularly important for people like your apprentices, to make sure that the employer has the right policies and procedures and legal processes in place to deal with this change to the Equality Act. I'm looking to do some training on this for members next month. So we'll have a look at what that means, so everybody's aware of what that looks like, because it does have an implication around apprentices, but it also has a massive issue. If we link this with the Office for Students guidance, there is a lot of overlap for that upper age range as well, and keeping them safe, and implications for institutions too. Mandatory reporting of child sexual abuse. This was coming in and before Parliament in the Criminal Justice Bill. That disappeared when we had the general election, and so there's been a private House of Lords bill from Dame Tanni Grey-Thompson, who's put this bill before Parliament. So we're waiting to see how that makes its way through. We then got the Education British Values Bill that's making its way through. And then in the King's Speech, we were told there's a crime and policing bill coming, a victims' courts and public protection bill coming, a children's wellbeing bill, and there looks like they're finally going to tackle the thorny issue of mental health and maybe even update that legislation. And then to conclude, let's have a look at some cases. This is the most recent case of sexual abuse by a female teacher to male students, and you may have seen this in the press over the summer. Been found guilty of 4 counts of sexual activity with a child and 2 counts of sexual activity with another child. Both boys were 14 and 15, so slightly mid-teen range. Rebecca Joins became pregnant deliberately with boy B's child, told him that she couldn't get pregnant, and then refused to allow him to know anything about the child, refused to tell him what was happening, which frankly is just utterly horrific for this child, to have that in place. She was sentenced in July to 6.5 years. And it's a reminder, it's a massive reminder for us as professionals that abuse comes not just from men but from women, and we have to be aware that it doesn't matter how good our processes and procedures, we have to accept and believe that things like this can happen where we work. Despite everything we put in place, things like this can happen. And our job is to put as high a hurdle in place as possible and create as safe a culture as possible for our young people to share when something's not right, and equally for staff to say that they feel really uncomfortable about the way somebody is behaving. Few more cases for you that have come up over the summer. We've had a limousine driver sentenced to 24 years for sexually abusing 12 to 17-year-old girls. He would pick them up in his limo, he would shower them with gifts, he would take them places, and then he would abuse them. I'm going to come back to the next one. We've got a fraud conviction for a woman who gave false information about her qualification when she started it. It started at Buckinghamshire New University, carried all the way through, and so she's had a fraud conviction there. We've not yet had a sentence. We've started to see the first convictions come through in relation to summer riots. Now, I want to just mention this generating sexual abuse images, because many of you will have seen the sentencing that occurred in terms of Hugh Edwards. I'm really interested to see how the criminal courts deal with computer generated sexual abuse images and child sexual abuse images. This gentleman created child sexual abuse images, went into WhatsApp chat rooms and sold these generated computer generated child sexual abuse images. I don't know how the court is going to deal with this in terms of sentencing. And I'm going to be very intrigued to read the judge's comments, which I'm hoping will be made public, because I think this is a really important issue. We did have, in the last parliamentary term, a conversation about AI generated sexual imagery being made into an offence. That's not on the legislative books as yet. That disappeared with the the criminal justice bill. So I'm hoping that this may be a bit of a stepping stone in order to really look at that. And I'm hoping that this government will start and relook at putting that back on the legislation books, because this is a fairly big issue. So we'll wait and see what happens with that, and that's due next week. So we will wait and see what comes of that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. If you're looking for Working Together updates, I do have a webinar. You can find that on our website. DSL refresher on the 10th of October and the 18th of December. There are still spaces on that. If you're looking for supervision, let's have a conversation. I still have spaces in my diary. And if you're wanting some more ongoing support, closer support, ongoing training, supervision, all of that, policies and procedures reviewed, then let's have a conversation about you coming and joining our Safeguarding Leaders Hub. Otherwise, lovely people, have a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. And I will see you in 6 weeks, if not sooner, if you'd like to come and join any of our other sessions. Thank you all very much.